In 2004, a kid from Fujian province scored nearly 700 out of 750 on China's National University entrance exam, the Gaokao. His name was Ding Yuanjiao. He went to Tsinghua for chemistry, Peking University for a master's in energy engineering, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore for a PhD in biology, then Oxford for a second master's in biodiversity. By summer 2025, he was 39 years old on a scooter delivering food orders for tips. But this story didn't break in the American press as a gotcha for China's economy. It actually broke in China first. He is famous in China because the country has begun to recognize what he represents. The 2025 college graduating class was 12.22 million strong, an all-time record. Over 97,000 graduates for PhDs in 2024 alone. In Beijing, postgraduate graduates...
Why would he do a second master's after a PhD? I'm just taking a shot here, but he might be smart and love learning.
Now outnumber undergraduates. The system produced exactly the people it was designed to produce, and there are no slots for them. In July 2025, Ding posted a video on WeChat telling students who did badly on the Gaokao not to despair. Many of them, he said, would end up working similar jobs to people who did well. The most credentialed delivery rider in China...
Our job market is so bad right now. You know, Unlearning Economics has a good video on this. I believe it's called Why is Everything a Coffee Shop Now? Or something about the coffee shop economy. But the idea is that in a world where you no longer need a huge number of manufacturing jobs as a percentage of every nation's economy, there is a deliberate effort by the capital class to shift over everyone into a kind of temporal, low benefits, low long-term guarantees, inefficient work, like a coffee shop. The idea being that like the average person's job is no longer on a farm where their work is necessary to produce the food that feeds the world, or in a manufacturing center where a highly trained worker can potentially through efficiency, replace the work of hundreds or thousands of people just on their own. But rather, people are now working in what would be called, I guess, the informal job sector. That is to say, like, whether a coffee shop has 8 employees or 10, it's kind of marginal how much of a benefit you're getting with those extra 2. You know what I mean? It's gig economy. Thank you. Like, but not just gig economy. It's not just about doing like Ubers or whatever. It's about like more and more people are getting employed in sectors that offer basically no long-term guarantees of employment. People are just scraping by. This is like a critical difference because there are people today who make more money even after inflation than people who worked steady jobs back in the 1970s. But the people back in the 1970s enjoyed one thing people today don't: job security. Right? Like there are people back in the 1970s who had steady, reliable work with benefits, but did not make a lot of money at all. And that was how you could make a life, right? They had steady income. Nowadays, like if you're on your fucking ball, you can work the gig economy and potentially make a lot of money, but you are like run down to the fucking bone. No job security, no stability, no guarantees, no benefits. You're just like hopping like between jobs, work to work to work to work. You die of the stress. Yeah, exactly. It's basically like in the video, in the Unlearning Economics video, he compared it to how a lot of people in developing countries, like India, for example, made their living off of informal work. So you basically just scrape together the money that you need to live, not through a, white collar guaranteed job with benefits, but rather you find like a fruit stand. You see this in America too. There are loads of people in Los Angeles who make their day-to-day living like operating a fruit stand or whatever. Their job, they're not in the formal sector. They're not even like filing a W-2 or whatever. They literally just like through any means necessary, they scrape together whatever money they can. It's totally unreliable, and they're not even necessarily fulfilling like an efficient or economically rational sector of the economy. Like there might be too many fruit stands. It might be totally inefficient to have like 20 guys on every corner with a fruit stand. The point isn't to efficiently fill needs within the economy. The point is just like they are desperately trying to get whatever work they can. More and more people are being shifted over to this form of work because we do not need that many people working full-time professional jobs. It seems like in the long run, everyone's going to have work like this, We're rather than accept the fact that modern industrial efficiency allows the world's needs to be met with less than everyone working. Now everyone's going to be swapped over into like temporary. You're going to work like 8 hours this week, 17 the next week, and then 82 the next week. Everyone is going to be rushing to make money before their rent, before their rent payment. Is streaming an informal job? Yeah, of course. What I do absolutely counts as this. I might be successful, but keep in mind that for every one of me, there are literally thousands of people who work as live streamers, as sex workers like OnlyFans, or in anything like in the informal sector of content creation, who legitimately are like barely scraping by. The average person who makes a living off of YouTube or Twitch streaming or OnlyFans or whatever is just barely scraping by, and that's only the people making a living. For every person able to make a living off of it, there are 1,000 people who have tried but can't. Just didn't get lucky, you know?
China was telling the next generation of credential delivery riders that they had been misled all along about what the system promised them.
It's like the Indians engagement baiting MAGA people on Twitter to make blue check Twitter money. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. No, that is also absolutely a kind of informal work. It's not about fulfilling a rational economic need. Nobody benefits from it. You're just desperately trying to scrape whatever money you can from the margins of a system where the majority of the money flows upward and never comes back down.
That is not one man's problem. That is a system admitting through the mouth of its best student that it no longer knows what it is selecting for.
Do you think you have some special talent that other streamers don't, or were you just lucky? I was just lucky. I am now, I would like to think, a pretty good streamer, but if you see how I was back in 2019, I don't think I was anything special. I think I lucked out through adjacency to Destiny, and then since then I developed the skill set, you know? And hot, and I'm very attractive, obviously. That's got to be the main reason why. But that's how it is, you know? Now, I think you were charismatic from the beginning. Look, I don't want to talk down to myself because I've got a pretty high opinion of myself, but it's worth remembering that, like, basically everyone who is able to make a living off of content creation, luck is like 99% of it. The remaining 1% might be the skill. That might be a necessary part of it, but there are loads of uncharismatic successful streamers. A lot of it is really just inertia. It is a deeply unfair system. A lot of everything is luck, but unfortunately, the problem is that over time, luck is getting to be more and more of the game. You know, like in order for you to enjoy a basic, reliable, consistent, like subsistence living, you are limited. There are so many lines you have to cross, so many fences you have to fall on the right side of. And over time, it's only going to get worse. Fewer and fewer people over time are getting that reliable work. Anyway, sorry, we ended up talking about a lot of stuff. It's worth remembering that whenever you're comparing wages now to wages before directly, it's worth remembering that the biggest thing that's been lost over the past 50 years is just that, stability. We went from the average person who worked in America being like a guy with a job that you showed up at and worked full time and you got the paycheck bi-weekly and then you went home and you weren't on the clock when you were off the clock. That was the average job back then. But now, if you're a tech worker, congratulations. You might work from home. You're probably getting calls at all hours of the day. If you're a truck driver, and millions of people are, you have an insanely variable schedule. The only people who get the same kind of like reliable job, who enjoy that like 70s standards of benefits and work hours, for the most part, are government workers or people in like white collar office jobs. That's it. The problem is that like it used to be that was the case for blue collar workers too. If you were like a manufacturing worker, if you were a factory worker, if you were a car mechanic, so many people in those sectors also enjoyed what today is reserved exclusively for white collar workers. It used to be that the equivalent of being an Amazon warehouse fulfillment worker, like nowadays it's working Amazon, that's manufacturing, bucko, manufacturing and logistics. The equivalent of that job back in the 1970s was a stable, reliable paycheck where you had rights and benefits and a union, and even if you didn't make a lot of money, you might not make very much money at all, you had the stability, and when you were off hours, you were off hours. You might even be able to buy a house. But now, if you're an Amazon warehouse fulfillment center worker, dog, your life fucking... Your wages might be better, but do you have rights? Do you have a pension? Do you have job stability? Do you have full-time work? Do you have health insurance? Probably not. That's the shift. It's not that we're making less money. On average, people today make more money per hour work than they did back then, even accounting for inflation. Not as much as we should, but more. It's the stability. The stability is critical. The education minister did resign in the end. Well, it's not over. And the cost of living is shot way the fuck up. Just remember, the cost of living being very high is tolerable if you have stability. Like, I would be willing to bet, and I'm just taking a guess here, but I would be willing to bet that if a lot of people could take the Faustian bargain, listen, you are going to make less money. However, you are going to get a pension, a union, benefits, health insurance, and you are guaranteed to work this job until you retire. And in exchange, you get a, let's say, 30% reduction to your purchasing power parity. So flippant vacations, eating out, it's not happening. You're not going to be able to do a lot of the luxuries that you can enjoy right now. No more door dashing your burritos. However, you get stability. You get the knowledge that even if you have an off week, you're not going to be fired from your job, and the knowledge that your retirement is taken care of. I bet you most people would make that bargain. I really do. I think most people would. I think most people are like, yeah, I would rather live very, very modestly, but know that that would be my, I'm fine. No matter what happens, you're fine. If you have a medical incident, you have health insurance. If you have a bad week or whatever, dog, you're like a union worker. You're not losing your job because of like a week of bad performance or whatever. You don't need to worry about a managerial change or anything. I think people would trade that. The stability is the main thing that's been lost in the shift from formalized capitalist employment to informalized developing world employment, where people are like coffee shop workers or whatever. We're like, yeah, a coffee shop worker or a waiter can make a lot of money off of tips or even just the wage. Plenty of baristas make lots of money. There are waiters who take home hundreds of hours after hundreds of dollars after a basic 8-hour shift, but they don't have the stability. And because they don't have the stability, their life is fraught with uncertainty. And that uncertainty is an economic and social externality that people often fail to account for. We look just at purchasing power parity. We don't look at the feeling of security that you are going to be working this job for your life, basically. And I don't mean that in like a despair-inducing way. I mean that like, it's your job. It's not your life or whatever, but you know that no matter what happens, you're not going to have to go couch surfing. Anyway, my boss was head of a kitchen for over 10 years, laid off in a heartbeat. Yeah, this sort of stuff would be worth noting. This sort of stuff used to be like unthinkable. Or if it wasn't unthinkable, it was at the very least considered a huge faux pas. Back in the 1960s to the 1970s, if you gave your life to a company and then you lost your job basically for no reason, this was like rare. If you were a professional worker and you lost your job just like that, like, oop, just gone or whatever. This is a very sympathetic story. This is something people would freak out over. You know what I mean? Nowadays, it's like, yeah, that's like the only way you lose a job. Wait, oh, you lost your job suddenly without warning? Yeah, it's called losing your job. Everyone's had it happen to them. Used to be the plot of movies back then. It was an event so rare and so unfair that there was literally like a story there. Can you imagine a story nowadays of a person who worked for a coffee shop for 10 years, then got fired for no reason? Do you think anybody would treat that as like an exceptional story? Like anyone would be like, oh my God, they fired you after 10 years of work? Yeah, obviously. That's what everyone knew that would happen. Like, yeah, of course that happens. It's like, it's just like a basic, like, oh, yeah, that sucks. Had to happen eventually, right? I see your point. Yeah, it's normal now. Totally normal now. Super, super normal. Omni segment? No, the Omni segment is about financialization. This isn't about financialization. This is more about we just don't need everyone to work anymore. We are very efficient. The economy is very efficient. I don't mean like the capitalist economy. I mean that the post-industrial revolution economy, our ability to produce people's needs, it has grown to be very, very efficient. And as a consequence, we just don't need that many people working. So right now we have this like weird transitory, temporary in-between system where we haven't quite like internalized the fact that we don't really need people to be working the way they used to, but we also can't fathom giving people stuff for free. Not really. It does loop into financialization, but I think it's a distinct enough topic. Anyway, let's move on.